they sort of argue that Biden has the executive authority to be stricter on the border, so why do we need this legislation? But then we've sort of found ourselves in a circle where Biden was also pushing for national security priorities, for funding for Ukraine, Israel, the Indo-Pacific, but now they also want border security measures tacked onto that too. So I think we're just going to see this sort of drag out.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by White House reporter Naomi Lim. Naomi, President Joe Biden's memory has really been coming into focus. Talk a little bit about some of the areas in which people are really discussing this anew.
Well, I think what we're seeing is because he's out in public a lot, particularly behind closed doors in fundraisers, where he tends to be a little bit more relaxed and not speaking off a teleprompter. We're finding that there are a lot more examples of him sort of mixing up little details from the present and from the past.
Right.
The most recent ones of him sort of confusing the German chancellors, one for a living one and one for a dead one, which, sort of brings up that sixth sense. I see. Was it I see dead people? Yeah. And so I think that is something that's really cementing people who already have concerns about his age, and when you sort of see him walk slowly across the stage, when he sort of forgets what he's saying, and it just sort of solidifies a perception that's already out there. Then obviously we're sort of seeing the special counsel Robert Hur's report into his handling of classified documents and things that you think that would be seared into his memory, he's having trouble grasping onto, and I think that is going to be something that we're going to see Republicans really criticize him for. It was already a liability, and now we're going to see it become even more so.
Right, I mean, confusing people's names is a hallmark of older people, Catherine. So
I see what you did there.
You see what I did there. So obviously at some point there's going to be a physical for the president. It's re-election year. Usually the public gets to see what the latest health status is. This will probably give that even more focus than it otherwise might have had, no?
Yes, and you think, so we sort of went through a situation last year where it was supposed to come at the end of last year, and it got pushed out to like the beginning. 2022 being pushed out to the beginning of 2023. And so now we're sort of asking, when is this annual checkup supposed to happen? We're also sort of seeing whether they're going to be a mental competency tests. Hopefully they don't test him on that word.
Right. Say that 3 times fast.
I know. Particularly as you sort of see like people like Nikki Haley really grasp onto this, but hers is sort of like a double-edged sword where she's also trying to criticize Trump. I think that it'll be interesting. I think politically I don't understand why they want to keep pushing it out, because the closer that this sort of comes out, if it's closer to the election, that has political implications for him. In the past, we've sort of seen very slow, sort of different ailments that have been popping up from his different medical reports. The ones that was most interesting last year is this idea of sort of stiffening of the joints and things like that, and whether that was connected to brain function. So it'll be interesting to see what the update of that is. Obviously, he also has problems with cholesterol as well as asthma and allergies and things like that. But it's those sort of indicators about his age that I think that people will be keeping an eye on.
One thing that's certainly going to be top of mind is this blame game over the border that we're increasingly seeing between President Biden and former President Trump as they get ready, most likely, to have a rematch this fall.
Exactly. This is an issue that I think that is problematic for Biden, both from the Republican standpoint in terms of border security, but then also from his left flank when this idea that he was going to make concessions to Republicans in terms of the way that asylum processes and applications were either expedited in terms of deportation, but then also the criteria which their applications were assessed was going to become more stringent. And so I think this is something that Republicans see as a win for them. They haven't really hidden that sort of political angle. They sort of also blame it's like a process argument as well, where they sort of argue that Biden has the executive authority to be stricter on the border, so why do we need this legislation? But then we've sort of found ourselves in a circle where Biden was also pushing for national security priorities, for funding for Ukraine, Israel, the Indo-Pacific, but now they also want border security measures tacked onto that too. So I think we're just going to see I think we're just going to see this sort of drag out. It's really funny just how, well, it's not really funny because these are serious issues, but the way that the campaign season just sort of brings everything to a halt, even though we're sort of seeing record numbers of illegal migrants across the southern border.
So you've written a story about a former candidate who probably would like to be a candidate for president or some other office again someday, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. What is DeSantis doing now that sort of makes people think he might be on a little bit of a redemption tour?
Well, I think it's been really interesting to watch. Well, one, I think watching his campaign sort of progress over the 9 months, he definitely grew as a candidate, but since he sort of suspended his campaign, he's been a lot more relaxed on things like social media and then notching up sort of legislative as well as legal wins. And I think a lot of, like, for example, he posted a video of his kid talking about football. I mean, I don't understand what they were really talking about, but it was a humanizing sort of moment. And people sort of asked, well, why wasn't he doing that during the campaign? Maybe they would have voted for him if he had done that. I was sort of speaking to his past aides that he sort of has collapsed down his political machine. He's sort of just really left the official side of it in Florida and Tallahassee in place, but they're sort of saying, there's nothing going on here, I think because there are people speculating whether he's there as sort of a safety net just in case something happens with Donald Trump's trials, whether there's a conviction, whether that changes what happens at the conventions. They sort of really put that down. They sort of also say that it's because there's this understanding that campaigns are very hard work and he's just a lot more relaxed now. But it's sort of not only just this redemption, but also this political reputation rehabilitation, because he was sort of seen as this heir apparent who, spent almost $200 million on this campaign, and for it to sort of go from 100 to 0 in the space of 9 months is something that is, one, would be personally difficult to overcome, but also professionally as well, if he has future ambitions, particularly considering his governorship is term limited. Right,
and so he's going to have to do certain things to keep his name out there and himself in consideration.
Exactly, so we're sort of seeing things like him sending out Texas National State Guard the Florida National State Guard to Texas to sort of help Governor Greg Abbott out there with the border. We've also seen him weigh into things like Representative Ilhan Omar from Minnesota when she sort of alluded to Somali constituents in Minnesota that she was putting their community's interest, ahead of them in Congress. So we're sort of seeing him really weigh into these political games in a way that maybe he just feels a little bit unleashed and unplugged from the campaign.
Ron DeSantis, unleashed and unplugged.
You heard it here first.
Thank you, Naomi. You can read Naomi and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.